Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is that you inky savages are joining me for this video. Thanks once again for clicking on the Penboy Roy Fountain Pen Review channel. Today, I'm reviewing the Nahvular Eclipse Fountain Pen. Let me give you some background information on the brand. The brand used to be a brand called Narwhal. Now, Narwhal was not able to patent the name Narwhal because I guess it was just too broad and too general. It would be like trying to patent the word fish. So since they weren't able to do that, they took the name Narwhal and got it translated to a different Nordic language, I believe. And that came out to be Nahvular, spelled Nahvular. So if you're a fan of Narwhal and you think Narwhal is a different brand, it's not. They just changed the name so that they could copyright it. Now, this pen here is a very different type of pen that Nahvular is used to making. Nahvular in the past has made a lot of different acrylic fountain pens with piston filling mechanisms. They made them out of ebonite, and they tried to do things differently. This is the case for this pen here. They tried to go off a very different path by making a metal pen that's not a piston filler, rather it's a converter filled fountain pen, and the converter, for everything I can see, is proprietary to the brand. People will look at this converter and be like, hey, wait a minute, I think I've seen that before. It looks a lot like the Pilot Con 40 or Con 50 converter. And you would look at the two converters and think that they're exactly the same, but they're not. And I'm going to go more into that later. But first, let's take a look at the unboxing of this pen and see what this pen comes with. So this pen comes in a black cardboard sleeve with a silver foil of the brand on top and also the barcode on the side. If we slide off that sleeve, you're going to have the exact same logo on the inside, and you have this unique looking shoebox style box where the top slides off. Once you slide off the top, there's an indentation for the pen on both sides of the box, and then your pen rests nicely inside this pen body bag. Now, if you're wondering how to fill this, just know that on the inside there is a QR code that will give you instructions. The pen is a 12-sided pen with rather sharp edges at the corners. The clip here is actually attached on similar to the way you would see a clip on a Kaweco Sport. If you wanted to, you can take the clip off. Just be careful not to scratch the pen. Let's take a look at the nib. The nib is a very small, very Pilot Vanishing Point style nib, but it's made of stainless steel. The engineering behind keeping the nib wet while it's retracted is in this gate here. It's kind of like a drawbridge to a castle, and it's very similar to the Vanishing Point that we compare it to all the time. Now, people are definitely going to say, hey, how is this compared to the Vanishing Point? And I'm going to tell you straight up, it absolutely doesn't. It's an entirely different pen. Now, the concept might be the same in terms of the fact that it's a fountain pen that you have to click, and it's capless, but it's as similar to the Vanishing Point as the Curidas by Platinum is similar to the Vanishing Point. Now, you guys are probably wondering, well, how the hell do we fill this pen? It looks so awkward and almost looks like some kind of sci-fi Terminator 2 type sticky bomb or grenade that you would stick into Terminator's neck and then it'll blow up. It's actually pretty easy. There's two ends to the pen. The back end is the end that doesn't have the nib poking out of it. You just twist it counterclockwise, and eventually what will happen is it will release the back half of the pen. Now, if you look at the back half, it's like a birdcage. That black center is basically the cup that fits over the metal sleeve inside the front half, and that's where your threads are. From there, there's no parts that are going to go flying out or anything that you could actually lose. This is actually pretty easy. When you pull out the converter, it comes out with the nib unit. The upper half of the pen is similar to the Vanishing Point in that it has a keyed section as well as the nib unit housing. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fill this pen just like you would fill any other fountain pen. Today, what I'm going to be using is Edelstein Onyx from the Edelstein ink collection by Pelikan. This ink is black. It comes in a really nice bottle. Now, this is a pretty long feed, so we got to get it pretty deep in order for us to be able to fill the pen. If you don't go in past the black feed section, then you're not going to suck up ink. You're going to just have a partially filled converter. So afterwards, it's pretty simple. Just take a tissue and wipe down the feed shaft and the nib unit housing. Then we're going to reinsert the nib unit housing back into the pen and reassemble our pen. And as I said before, since it lines up, you're not going to misorient the pen Now, what I want to do is I want to provide you guys with a writing sample, but before I do that, I just want to give a shout out to Pen Chalet. Pen Chalet sent this pen for review. Thank you guys over at Pen Chalet. Ron, you're the best. I really appreciate it. So if you guys do watch this video and you do decide that you want to purchase this pen, please purchase it at our friends over at Pen Chalet. I also want to give a shout out to my sponsors, Luxury Brands of America. They are the distributors of some of the best pen cases in the world from a brand called Girologio. Please check out the Girologio Made website using the affiliate link in the description below, and make sure you use coupon code PENSAVAGE10 at checkout to save 10% on all the products on the GirologioMade.com website. Now, let's get on to the writing sample. So I was actually really surprised with how well this pen writes. I just love the feeling of how it writes. I love the smoothness. I love the very, very slight drag that it has. It writes super well. It's so smooth and buttery. It's not really bouncy. It doesn't have much bounce to it, but feels smooth. And it almost feels as if it were a gold nib, but it is not a gold nib. It doesn't feel over smooth either. So like as I'm writing with it, I'm never thinking, oh my gosh, it's so smooth. Maybe there's going to be a little bit of baby's bottom or something like that. Never ran into that issue. It's a perfect level of wetness. So from the time that I got this pen to now, I've been writing with it a lot. I've been using it as an everyday carry because I need to test out pens before I review them. What I found was that there is absolutely zero scratchiness. I love writing on any type of paper, even cheap paper. And that's why I was talking about the perfect level of wetness. Even on the cheapest paper, maybe it's the ink, but I think that the level of wetness and the amount of ink that it lays down is just right, so that even on the cheapest paper, it doesn't look like I just wrote all over some toilet paper. There's a lot of good aspects for it. This pen has a very unique look. I really do love the fact that Frank is willing to take risks, especially when those risks involve investment. Obviously, the whole capless click fountain pen has been done before. It's been around for a long time with Pilot. And of course, you're inspired by those ideas. But he wanted to change things up with the design. He wanted to change things up with the cost, because this is only a $99 pen. Now, in the real world of people who don't use fountain pens, paying over $20 seems like a lot, but for us fountain pen enthusiasts, $99 is actually a decent price for a decent steel nib pen, but the way this pen writes is far above and beyond decent. But that doesn't mean the pen is without its flaws, and I really want to talk about the flaws of this pen, because there are a few that may discourage you. One of the little things that might bother some people, it didn't really bother me, but it may bother others, and that's actually the 12-sided edges. And at each of the corners, there is a very sharp edge. Now, the edge isn't sharp enough that, if you put it in your hand and then someone pulls it out really quickly, it's going to cut you. But I like it because I don't really have soft inner hands, and sometimes I get very clumsy, so it does give me a lot of grab. So I don't feel like I'm going to drop the pen just by holding it. It also helps when it comes to holding the pen. When you're writing with the pen, that sharp edge kind of grips to the skin and it doesn't slide up and down. And I know that's a point of contention for a lot of you fountain pen users when it comes to steel grips. This one is so thick though that I don't think you're going to come across that issue. But I do want to talk about the flaws, and this one could go either way. But one of the flaws that I think is definitely an issue is in the blind cap. The blind cap came off. You're thinking, yeah, of course it comes off. It has to come off. No, look, it's supposed to stay attached to the back half of the pen, but it actually came off the end. And what it exposed was the threads that it was attached to had some cheap non-stick Elmer's glue, and that glue gave out. Once that glue gave out, the back end birdcage can in fact come off. And then you have to actually unscrew the whole black sleeve in order to fill the pen. That's a couple of extra steps that it wasn't designed to do. And being that there was some slightly tan glue residue that was coming off when the blind cap came off, indicates to me that even the designers thought that this blind cap isn't supposed to be coming off the way it did. So I'm actually going to show you a really quick fix for that in a different video, and it's really simple once you do fix it. But if you don't feel like having to smith your own pen and you don't want to fix it yourself, then go ahead and just send the pen back to whatever retailer that you got it from, and they will just make it right. Another nominal issue that I like to point out here is the way the nib comes out of the gate. Now, I've spoken to several retailers over the course of using this pen, and I get 50-50 mixes of answers. I was trying to figure out if what I'm about to talk about is exclusive to my pen, or is it a mixed bag? And it turns out it's a mixed bag. So if you look here, what you're going to notice is that the nib unit and the gate itself are slightly canted relative to the opening of the front end of the pen. That means it's not completely straight. Now, at first I was kind of wondering, maybe that was intentional and it's slightly at a canted angle, because if you're holding the pen, the clip being between your thumb and index finger would make you cant the pen at a slight angle, in which case the nib is completely flat while writing. But what do you do if somebody is a lefty? Now you have a pen that's at a hard angle against the page because of that cant. And like I said, I was speaking to other retailers, and other retailers were looking at their stock and they're saying, oh yeah, this one does. This one does not. This one has a cant. This one doesn't. So I think that the quality control in this issue is lacking in that area, combined with the fact that the glue on the back end of the piston knob gave out on the first day that I was using it is kind of an issue. Like I said, fixing it was easy enough. I do a lot of gunsmithing and I do a lot of tinkering on nibs, so I have all the equipment that I need to fix things like this. But those of you who don't want to mess around with like that, maybe it's just better if you send it back for an exchange. The other issue that I have with this pen is designed for quick draw. It's designed for practicality, but in my time with the pen, I find that it's not entirely the most quick draw pen, and it's not the most practical either. Why is that? Meanwhile, you have the Pilot Vanishing Point and you have the Platinum Curidas, both click pens, but those seem to be excellent in terms of practicality for quick draw use. Why is this one not? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because on those pens, you have click mechanisms that are isolated to the very back end of the pen. This pen here, the whole back half is the click part. So if you look at it right here, in order to click the pen, you have to push and depress the entire back half. Here's where the problem comes in. You take it out of your pocket and you're ready to write and you're holding your pen. And then you go to click it, but you see my index and middle finger and ring finger? It's gripping the pen. So as I go to push it, I am actually stopping myself from depressing the click part. So what I have to do is I have to get used to holding it with my pinky and lightly holding it with my index, middle, and ring finger, and then be able to click it. I don't know if that's a big deal for you, but for me, if I'm in a rush, I don't want to have to sit there and struggle with it and think, oh, I have to loosen up 3 fingers. That's a lot of fine motor skill that when sometimes things are chaotic, you don't have the time to do that. The only thing that I would say is a hard no when it comes to this pen, and I don't know if this happened to anybody else out there who has this pen, and if you don't have this pen yet and then you decide to get it, be careful of this. Sometimes I'm running around and I take out the pen really quick, and from here, I put my thumb down on the nib side of the pen without realizing I'm on the wrong side, and what happens is I'll go to push it. I have some resistance from my fingers stopping it, so I push harder, and as I'm pushing harder, it depresses. And when it depresses, guess what? That fine steel nib is jamming into the pad of my thumb. That's happened about 5 or 6 times on day 1. It happened an equal number of times on day 2. So eventually what I had to do was I had to stop myself, take out the pen, and then remember to flip it, hold the pinky and the ring fingers a little bit firmer than all the other fingers, kind of loosen up these fingers, and then go and make sure I'm not stabbing my finger. Now, whenever it did happen, I'm not stabbing hard enough to draw blood, and it's not cutting the skin or puncturing through the skin, but it's not pleasant. Every time it happens, it sucked. But what I will say is this. I'm pissed off when it happens, but as I'm writing, by the time I'm finished writing my first or second word, the writing experience is so wonderful, and the way it writes is just feels so good. I can immediately just feel and see the blood draining from my temperamental brain. Carrying it around, I can see somebody with smaller hands having to use 2 hands to actuate the pen. And the point of a click pen is not having to use 2 hands. And I can also see people accidentally going on the wrong end and poking their thumb. It's not going to cause a severe physical injury, but it's going to really piss you off. Now, the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to this pen, when it comes to the negatives, is that as much as this nib is covered by the engineering of the little drawbridge gate in the front. I have to say though, after several hours, the pen will hard start. Now, at first I thought it was because I was keeping it in a pocket and the nib is pointing up. But then I also left it lying on its side at a desk for an hour or two, came back and went to write with it. And as I went to write with it, I do notice it takes about 3 or 4 attempts to start a letter. But once it starts after the 3rd or 4th stroke, it has no problems. So there is some nib drying issues involved with this pen that I didn't see with the Platinum Curidas or the Pilot Vanishing Point. I think this pen has some first-gen issues in the same way you always see when a new PlayStation comes out. There's always going to be some kinks and bugs. The difference between a PlayStation is you can get online updates to fix things. When it comes to a fountain pen, though, your first-gen issues stay yours, and you just got to learn to live with them and work around them. So I personally think when it comes to the writing experience, even with the hard starts, because the hard starts are it's a very short, maybe 2 seconds it takes to get the ink running through the feed again. And then it starts writing. And when it does write, man, do I love how this writes. I can't tell you how much I love the way this writes. It's so satisfying. I think in particular can overlook the flaws that this pen has. And on top of that, the look is so unique and different than pretty much anything out there. This one is the all silver one with the silver trim. I would say definitely get this pen because it is certainly unique. The flaws in terms of the blind cap being glued with cheap Elmer's glue is not forgivable, but I can live with it because I can fix it. If you can't fix it yourself, and the idea that the upper and lower half are the same size and the click is the back half, and if you don't like the idea that you have to kind of get used to it or the risk of jamming your own thumb, don't get the pen. There's no point for you to stress out. But there are going to be people out there like me who like the look, who like the creativity of the design. And most importantly, this writing experience when it comes to the nib is so wonderful that I have to overlook all the issues that I talked about. Make sure you guys check out last week's podcast video number 200, Why Everyone Hates Mont Blanc. And make sure you watch to the end because there is a giveaway for a Sailor 1911 large fountain pen. Thanks again for watching. I love you guys. Be well, be safe.